So it's the final day of the NATO summit in Washington. So far, leaders have pledged their support for Ukraine, and the draft communique reiterated support for Ukraine on its path to NATO membership. But Hungary thinks otherwise. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He takes it forward from me here, gives us more on the NATO summit and other stories making headlines around the world. So, Nick, what is expected on the final day of the summit?
Well, plenty ahead, Tanvi, and a big day with big pledges expected. NATO leaders will end their summit on Thursday with a clear focus on backing Ukraine as US President Joe Biden faces growing calls from members of his own Democratic Party to drop his re-election bid. Biden will hold a rare solo news conference on Thursday where reporters are certain to question his candidacy in the November 5th presidential election, despite his hope to shift the narrative after a day surrounded by allied leaders. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will also hold a news conference with NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg on Thursday after meeting with both Republican and Democratic lawmakers at the US Capitol. Meanwhile, Hungary said that Ukraine's admission to NATO would weaken unity in the group. In comments on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Washington, Hungary's foreign minister also said it does not want NATO to become an anti-China bloc and will not support it doing so. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán met Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday to discuss a potential Ukraine peace deal, following visits to Kiev and Moscow. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said on Thursday it was watching as NATO's military infrastructure moved closer towards Russia's borders and that Moscow would need to act to contain the Western military alliance. A Russian news agency cited Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov as saying that NATO's goal was to suppress Russia and that the alliance's actions represented a serious threat to Russian national security. The United States and Germany have said in a joint statement on Wednesday that Washington will start deploying long-range fire capabilities in Germany in 2026 in an effort to demonstrate its commitment to NATO and European defence. China on Thursday criticised a draft communique from the NATO summit in Washington that described China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war effort in Ukraine, saying that those comments were biased and full of provocations. Speaking to reporters at a regular press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jin Lin said NATO hyped up China's responsibility in regards to the Ukraine crisis. Lin also accused NATO of playing up the tension in the Asia-Pacific region with a full-on Cold War mentality and belligerent rhetoric. Beijing put forward a 12-point paper more than a year ago that set out general principles for ending the conflict but did not get into specifics. Well, NATO's 32 members have pledged unwavering support for Ukraine. The bloc's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, said that NATO allies had collectively identified China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war.
In the way that this is a strong message from NATO allies that we really want Ukraine to join and that we are working with Ukraine to make that happen. Words are important and words creates expectation, creates an agenda, defines an ambition. But of course, as important as words, the language in the declaration is actually what we then have agreed to do. So in many ways, action speaks at least as loudly as words. So I think you need to understand the declaration with a reference to a irreversible path to membership together with what we do. China provides dual-use equipment, microelectronics, a lot of other tools which are enabling Russia to build the missiles, to build the bombs, to build the aircraft, to build the weapons they are using to attack Ukraine.